Hi. Hello. Hi, everybody. Oh, this is great. Look, a whole thing. I wish I was charging.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience as well while we tried to fit everyone in. I think we've just about managed, so sorry if you feel a bit sardine-like. Hopefully you are comfortable wherever you are. Thank you all for coming. My name is Virem Swami. I'm a lecturer here at the University of Westminster, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the University of Westminster, and welcome back to Plug in Your Brain. I think maybe if I just start off by introducing Ruby, and I know she doesn't need an introduction, but I guess by way of introduction, mental health issues have become almost the kind of scourge of modern day life. They have a huge impact, not just in terms of the emotional, physical, and emotional care of individuals and their families, but also they have a huge economic burden on national economies. But mental illnesses also come with stigma. To be labelled as having depression or any mental illness now, you risk being maligned as self-indulgent or irresponsible or even mad sometimes. And our guest tonight wants to change all of that. Ruby began her career in entertainment and TV, but more recently she has, I guess, delved into the world of neuroscience and psychotherapy. She's published a book about the brain. So, Ruby,
Yeah.
I guess maybe by opening up, I guess when I think of you,
Yeah, that's
and I think
projection.
of you a lot.
Yeah.
When I think of you, I guess I have an image of you as the person I see on TV, the Ruby I see on TV, and I guess, and maybe for lots of people as well, there is maybe a disjuncture between that version of you and the version that is around now, which is much more, I guess, in the back of your book it says you're the poster woman for mental health, and I guess there is maybe that disjuncture, and I wonder if you could explain how you came to be here
Tonight?
or
Yeah. Right. First of all, I could say to you, I remember when you were potty training, and look at you now. Because, we live so long now, you have to reinvent. Otherwise, it's pathetic if you stick to something. So whatever you think is your thing. I have no explanation for it, except when I get bored, I get bored. Or the reality is if you were a ballerina, you're finished at 20. At TV, you got a little more longevity, and it's better to leave the party before the party leaves you. And so I always was going to be in psychology, but then I got caught in the narcissism of television, and it was lucrative. So, but then I said I'll always go back to that. And then of course you go on television. You have to be entertaining, otherwise they're not paying, and they don't really want to see me how I am in my house. So you bump it up. Well, eventually you bump it up because that's entertainment. But then sometimes you might get stuck in it. So you're kind of imprisoned with this thing. So people come up to you and they laugh, but you haven't said anything funny. John Cleese had this thing happen to him. He was in a supermarket and he had a heart attack, and all these people came around and they were laughing because they thought it was a prank. So I'm not complaining, but that's his problem. But the point is that it isn't you. I don't mind that, but then you have to go on. As you get older, you have to say, okay, what really tastes good? It's so hard to let go of stuff because you work so hard to get it. But eventually you have to go, okay, drop it, and then move on.
And I guess one of the big things that you're an advocate now for is about understanding mental health and understanding depression in particular.
But that happened by accident.
How did that
happen?
I
wouldn't have ever talked about it because, if your boss finds out, even in show business, I was scared of being fired because you have no remit.
Yeah.
Or ostracized from my friends because they'll go, can I say wanker?
Yes.
What a wanker.
I would also like to say what a wanker.
You say, yeah. About, there I have a job that everybody wants, and now people are being carpet bombed. They live in townships, and now I'm complaining about a mental disorder. So I kept my mouth shut. But then, I say this in my show, is that Comic Relief outed me because they said, could they use a picture of me? They were giving some money to mental health charities, and I said, yeah, sure, because they knew something wasn't right. So I thought it was going to be a teeny picture, obscure, but they put a giant poster of me all over the tube station saying, this woman has mental illness, please help her.
But
So then I wrote I
you
thought
did-
I'm going to write a show and make that look like it's my publicity poster.
But you did have a mental illness.
Yeah, but I didn't want anybody to know. So I pretended the show was called Out of Her Mind. and then I toured mental institutions because that was the kick of talking to my own people.
Yeah.
And they I make a joke saying, the bipolars used to say, I laughed, I cried. I make a joke out of it. But it really was, it was unbelievable to have that crowd watching you, because you'd think they were coming in kind of catatonic, some of the time, head was back. But by the end of the show, everybody asked really smart questions, and you'd make them laugh. Now that's a pleasure.
There's no pressure on all of you tonight to ask really smart questions as well.
Oh yeah,
do you mind
some
if-
of them were insane, but...
Do you mind if I guess during this whole period you were at some point clinically depressed?
Yeah, but come on, that you don't have it all the time. That's why there's such a stigma, because it's episodic. So people say, well, if you don't have it that week, why do you have it this week? And I say, well, what herpes comes and goes. Why can't I have some? So, you know how it's there and then it's gone. I've got a little there. It happens. So, here, have some water. So the same thing with depression. I mean, people would say, well, if you have depression, how are you sitting here? And I go, read my lips. It isn't all the time. If I had it, I would be in a state of a piece of concrete, unable to move my hand. And people can't picture that. But when you're with other people who have mental issues, they know. We know that it's, you don't have to, be bored to death with people telling you to perk up. Like I never thought of that. So with them, you don't have to explain. It's not about sadness. It's about no feeling, over and out, no question that this has to do with mourning or a situation. It's a mental disease. It's a brain disease that, is similar to other mental diseases. It's just a different area in your brain. I mean, you wouldn't say to somebody with Alzheimer's, come on, remember what you did yesterday. So how dare you say to a depressive, wake up?
When I was preparing for tonight, I was watching some of your YouTube clips, and it's quite sad to see. I mean, a lot of people are supportive, but I think one of the common comments was, well, she should take responsibility for herself, or she should just perk up, or this is just a fad diagnosis. And I wonder,
who said that?
People.
About who?
About you.
Oh, I don't read them.
I had to, sadly.
All right, so they tell me to perk up?
And to get over it and that kind of thing. And I think that's quite a common response to people who are suffering.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the things that you do in your book is to kind of give the opposite and to say that actually it's quite frequent. You say 1 in 4 people suffer from some kind of mental illness.
And your point?
I guess the point is that I wonder how...
Sorry.
Yes. I don't know what my point is. Thank you. I guess the point would be that, like you say, I think a common response is to tell someone who is suffering just to perk up and get over it. And I wonder if that's something that you...
No, nobody... I mean, when they did catch me in the beginning, people would say... But I never told anybody. So once
Why didn't you tell anyone?
Because I told you. Sorry. I didn't want to get fired, and I didn't want my friends to think I was a wanker. So when I did the show, a lot of my friends came, and they said, was I the one that said perk up? And I said, yes. I said it to every one of my friends. Then they felt really guilty. But because I performed it on a stage, it was all forgiven. And then I don't meet the people that say perk up. I meet the ones that say, do you know where I can get help? I'm so ashamed. Did I pass it to my daughter? I'm too embarrassed to take medication. I want to kill myself. Those are the ones I'm meeting. So because I'm not an expert, I used to have once a week when the theater was shut, I'd invite people from the public, and then I'd bring a whole bunch of volunteers from SANE, run by Marjorie Wallace. And so there'd be a band of kind of therapists. And then I'd bring neuroscientists. I brought, and Mark Williams and Louis Walport and Peter Fonagy. So everybody could ask the questions they always want to ask, and I would just serve cookies. So that was the deal, that if you needed help, I got it for you, or we'd take numbers and say, come back on Tuesday. And that's what I got. I didn't get anybody heckling me and saying, pull yourself together. That was the deal.
Yeah. And you talk about anyone who, you talk about the sense of community, the sense of we, that...
Yeah, I like that. You know, when people go, I'm one in four, my heart is warmed. But then it turns out the next show and this book is not about depression. I mean, there's a little section. But I don't want to be the poster girl for mental illness, so I went to Oxford and I studied what goes on in the brain, and I graduated 5 weeks ago. Must mention that. I have photos of me. I have photos. Did you know that?
I didn't really graduate.
I have a little picture of me with the hat, so if you come by, I'll show it to you. Because it's the happiest
Could
day.
someone Google it and send it now so we can put it up on screen?
Yeah. I don't think it's in there.
Oh.
Okay. But what was I talking about? Oh, so the book was about how everybody, they don't all have mental illness, but certainly in this culture, you have to learn to pull the brakes. Because I'm not criticizing about the internet, I'm not criticizing it, thank God it's here. But we have to individually learn how to, understand where our tipping point is and not get angry at ourselves, because I can't keep up with the woman who works 27 hours a day, has 8 children, makes cakes, and jogs at 3 o'clock in the morning. They should be killed. They should be killed. But, I have to understand I can't do that, and it's not because I'm a loser or whatever, but we're in this society where everybody's, we're all competing, we're all busy. The whole thing about, God forbid you say you're not busy. Try it sometime. Watch their reaction. It's like you have Ebola.
So, you got Ebola as well?
A little. Yeah. So it's about what's happening to our brains in this society, in the West. In the rest of the world, they're dealing with poverty and whatever. But we are the only people that are killing ourselves with our own thoughts.
Yeah.
Stress they say, is going to be the big killer in 2020. And these people who are, in war zones or whatever, and we're lucky enough to be in the Western world, and we're killing ourselves with our own thoughts. Because that's stress. I don't have to... It's only how it affects me. It's not really out there. There isn't that much disease going around. And by 2020, they'll have probably a lot of cures. But we'll be highly stressed. And that'll kill you, too. You know that. And
you talk about this in the book. You talk about how normal life now has made us so, I guess, damaged. Is that the right word to use here?
It pays its toll on how much adrenaline and cortisol is on the whole time, because our brains, we're only supposed to know if a predator was behind us, but because we're plugged into the internet and we're bombarded with bad news, we're on high alarm all the time. Whereas before it used to go down when we weren't scared. And now everything's, if there's a 3.6 earthquake in, I don't know, or a shark attack in Malawi, we're still alarmed. Like, do we need to know this? I actually say in the book, we were only built to know what our neighbors were doing. Like, if the woman next door to me was having sex with the man next door to her, I have to know that. But 4 doors down, I shouldn't know that. So I think we were made, we don't have the bandwidth for this stuff. So we're exploding.
And that's the damage. That's
the damage, but because of neuroplasticity, we can take the rein in our hands and change our own brains. Society doesn't have to change, but we can do it.
I'd like to maybe come back to neuroplasticity, but maybe just on a kind of personal level. So you, at some point, had, would it be fair to say you had a change of heart?
About what?
About your life, and you decided to become a psychotherapist?
I didn't want to be a psychotherapist, but
you did.
I did get a thing, but I wasn't good. I was good in the beginning, and then I got kind of bored, and I used to want to...
So you were seeing patients?
I had to do 200 hours. I did that.
Was it strange that patients come...
No, because I was working in Women's Trust, and there were women who were, straight from Pakistan. The last thing they would, so get over yourself. Not you, but... I think people who are psychotherapists are angels. I mean, how you give that much to a human being. I'm too selfish, but, I understand how hard that is. So I became that, but there was a moment in TV I lost, I said, leave the party before it leaves you. So I studied psychology at Berkeley when I was young, and I thought, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to wait till the career, starts to... When we start to go into reality shows, that's when it's time to get off the bus. When you're asked to swallow a cockroach on an island off of Australia, it's time to say goodbye. Some people love doing that, but, and people get desperate to hang on to their celebrity, going, please, please, I'll eat my own liver. Just don't make me leave television. But I thought, okay, I'm going to do something else. And then I said, oh, okay, because women who are having, in the beginning of menopause, you know, when they realize guys won't hit on them anymore, they decide to become psychotherapists. Am I right? Either that or they open a home for homeless cats. So I was at the right point. But then I didn't want to do psychotherapy.
Why not?
I wanted to learn about the brain, because that's my interest.
And that's when you went to Oxford?
I went to Oxford later. I'm saying lines from my book. I crashed a course at UCL, and everybody else was 21, and I told them I had a skin disease that made me look really old. And I got to go to parties and stuff, and then...
I really feel like I should be a lot further away from you, so...
you won't catch old.
You've got Ebola, skin disease...
And oldness.
And oldness. Yeah. I think oldness is not catching, is it?
No.
Okay.
So then, that was interesting, but it's too detailed. I couldn't keep up with it. But then, when I learned about self-regulation, I went to brain... I looked up what the greatest techniques were for being able to lower your own cortisol. Yeah. Or what was good for depression and OCD and anxiety and stress and everything. And the results were mindfulness and cognitive therapy. So I thought, I'm going to take both because I don't want to take any risks. So then I hunted down the founder of MBCT, and he was at Oxford. And he said, well, he knew I was nuts because I was slammed into a couple trees on my way there. And he said, I'll teach you mindfulness. But I thought, well, I really want to know about the brain because I'm not going to get into fluffy areas. I hate that. You know, when somebody asks me my star sign or hands me an angel card.
What's an angel card?
They hand you an angel, this is 20, hand you an angel card. There's a picture of an angel on it, and it says, you will go and be blessed today because you are the greatness of the goodness and the goddess with it. It goes on. They hand you, normal people, smart people will hand you this crap. So I thought, okay, science or angel cards. So I picked science. Call me crazy. And I thought, well, you can see in the brain, you can see the activity, and they can look on scans and see what happens after cognitive therapy or mindfulness. And I thought, well, then I have to try this.
So can I ask you, what is mindfulness?
What is it? Well, in a sense, it's similar to cognitive therapy, which is you learn to watch your thoughts. You don't feel that they are you. A lot of us think those voices are us. So there's another part of the brain where you can watch them. And when you lean back a little bit, as the observer, you notice that they aren't solid, that they kind of come and go. They're like the weather. But it's more complicated than that because you don't just sit back. What actually mindfulness is it's training your attention. Because people say, I pay attention. I say, well, eat a chocolate. You have it on the first bite, but by the third bite, your mind's somewhere in Bulgaria. So it does teach you to focus. You know, so if I'm reading a book, I can really read a book. Not bully for me, but because I do it every day, like a sit-up. And the way it works, I'm making it simple, is when the amygdala's up, you know, the alarm system, and most of the book is why it's up. We have to, you know, win at X Factor, we have to text, I have to tweet for God's sake, you know, making friends with people I've never met before by telling them what I had for lunch. And in the beginning I said it was for work, but now I just look every day for numbers, going, 17 more people know I exist. So all this stuff, these memes are coming in, and so it's on quite a lot. Now, when you notice it, most of us don't notice it. We're just living in this environment thinking this is who I am. When you use the insula, you know that one. Yeah. I'm making it simple. You use another part of your brain. Believe me, it's another bit. When you have a stomach ache or you stub your toe or you feel an emotion inside, you're using the insula. You don't have to buy it on Amazon, everybody's got one. So the minute you take your focus and you put it on a sense, either listening or feeling or tasting, immediately the amygdala goes down. So it's kind of tricking your mind. The minute you focus on something that's in your body or tasting, automatically it's like you can't drive a car in 2 gears and still drive. So it's kind of, now the problem is you have to practice a little while every day because your brain really is used to running you. And same with, you don't go to a gym and do one sit-up and get a six-pack. So even for a few seconds a day, if when you're waiting for a bus, it's not going to come any quicker if you look at your watch. If you just either listen or look at somebody. We don't use that. We're thinking, oh, forward and behind, I'm ruminating, why did that guy not call me? But you really just, your brain will take you back, but you just really bring it back. You bring it back. Just for a few minutes, that's already unwiring the wiring in your brain. It's breaking the habit.
I guess,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay, you'll tell me.
And is the thesis then that we can change the brain through just behaving differently?
Not behaving, but anything like Tai Chi or Pilates or even walking or even sports. When you sense it in your body, send the attention in. You're learning to strength and focus. So then in a scanner you watch the insula activate and the neurons start to unlock from their held positions. Because when you do something over and over and over again, the neurons start to connect. Well, this is made simple, right? But whenever you do it over and over again, they lock in more. So that becomes a habit, which is, I think, is so interesting. Do we have personalities, or is it just a series of habits? So,
what do you think? Do we have personalities? Or is it
the genes do a few things, but but we can override them. That epigenetic stuff. So when we get stuck in habits, your worldview gets so small that you think your reality is the real reality, and that everything we see is tainted by our memory. So if I see you for the first time, I'm kind of holding you hostage to who you look like. But with this unwiring, you have a more flexible mind. You hold yourself back from your trigger, which is, I'm usually aggressive, so you just watch that and hold it back. It's unwiring. It's making other possibilities.
This is the idea of neuroplasticity.
That's neuroplasticity.
And how does this relate to mental illness? I mean, am I right in thinking that mindfulness helps us to alleviate or push back?
No. I mean, I think with depression, if you have more than 3 episodes, it's probably going to come again. But while I was writing the book, because I'm paying attention, I can tell when my mind, which I never could before, I can tell when the quality of the voices start to change, and I call it the early pitter-patter, just before the tsunami. And I can hear that, and then I can do things about it to lessen the impact. So rather than making myself busier or drinking a lot, or taking a lot of jobs, because it's part of the shame of having depression is you get yourself real busy to show you're okay before you take to your bed. That comes next. But everybody gets kind of, to show that they're perfectly fine. So instead of doing that, which I did in the past, I tell everybody everything is canceled. I checked into a retreat that cost £29 a night. I'm thrilled about that, because if you go to an institution, it drains your bank account. So £29, I didn't have any internet or whatever, and you feel the cortisol coming down. Usually it was starting to take months for it to come down. Now, if you just leave it alone, you don't talk to anybody or get riled up, it came down, and then 5 days later, I was the life of the party there. So I can feel it coming. I'm not saying it's not going to come again.
And presumably you practice mindfulness now.
Well, I have to. It's like a person with a bad back. They have to do certain exercises. I know I've got depression, and this is my exercise.
I'm just going to hog Ruby for a couple more questions, but we are going to open up the floor to questions from the audience. There is also a speaker slip system in operation, so if you would rather not ask a question...
You can slip us a slip.
And just hand your... so if you hand your slips back to one of the volunteers who are dressed in white and who are now going to stand up and walk around, if you hand these slips back to them, we'll try and get to your questions. Just a couple of other questions while we get the speakers going. Are you a different person now as a result of mindfulness?
I'll never know, because there's no brain standing back and watching. So
do people treat you differently?
They tell me if they have problems, and I love that, and then because they open themselves up, and then it's a mutual exchange of energy. If you're just a character and people laugh at you, there's no energy exchange. So I kind of get, I don't get nervous in front of audiences anymore because I'm getting it back.
Yeah.
So I leave when I do a show. I feel kind of not drained at all because I got it straight back. When people give you compassion and you throw it back, you're energized. So it's a different kick.
This is probably the hardest question I'll ask you tonight.
How much is this book?
At some point you say the big question, I suppose, is what is the point of life, or what is the meaning of life?
I don't think I asked that.
I'm sure you do, because I circled it somewhere.
Oh, yeah, Bathrooms of Grandeur, you circled that.
I did, I thought that was important.
Should I read that?
Yes, go on.
This is, I'm being flippant sometimes, but I'm talking about how how we all feel our disease of our time is that we all feel enlightenment, not enlightenment, what's the word? I'm going to look it up because it's got to be in here. This is so bad. We feel like we deserve something. What's that word? That's dyslexia. That's bad dyslexia. Entitlement. So I sort of say there was a time when we were accepted our lot, but now we don't anymore. We were either peasants or, we went, okay, you plow, you breed, you die, shit happens. So now everybody wants to be, king, because magazines say, come on, you can have it all. And then it leads to heartbreak. So I wrote this thing called Bathrooms of Grandeur, which is my theory, as you can tell how mentally deranged someone is by viewing their bathroom. If they believe they need a chandelier, an Italian marble tub, and a toilet that performs more than 3 functions, now some of them play Rachmaninoff when you lift the lid, squirt you with perfume, and then say thank you in French when you lower the lid, you are far, far from the shores of sanity. Freud should have come up with a therapy where you interrogate the clients about how they envision their decor of their bathrooms rather than asking about sex. Sex tells you nothing. How you want your lavatory to look is the gateway to the unconscious. Something like in a bathroom, you get a real whiff of reality because it's just doing it. On the toilet, nobody's a star. Remember that and you'll go far in life. Otherwise, it's very smart. But that's there's little flippant moments.
But coming back to my question, what is the meaning of life? Or what?
Don't be so, come on, that stupid grin, come on. What you tell me. What do you think I was going to say? Here it is?
Yes.
I don't have it. That's my next book, probably. I mean, in the show I did before, now I'm doing this show, the question was, what's the instruction manual? Because even our domestic appliances have instruction manuals. It says, in a dishwasher, put in white powder.
Yeah.
But if I tried that in, I'd end up in rehab. So the question was, what's the instruction manual? Not in the book, but if you want the instruction manual about how you work, you have to look no further than in here. If you pay attention, you'll watch how you work. But then, rather than get angry about it, we're stressed about stress. You go, God, I'm stressed. I'm such an idiot. So we layer it on. So you send in a second arrow to give yourself more pain. They say pain is pain, but suffering is optional. So if you just watch the show, but you're sitting back a little bit, that's the manual. I don't know the meaning of life.
Can we take a question, maybe? If there's anyone who'd like to ask a question while I go through some of your speaker slips, just put your hand up and one of the volunteers will come around with the microphone. Anyone?
They will. There's somebody. Hi. Do you want a mic?
The mic, Karina.
Hi, this lady wants it. This one in the front. Her. Yeah, this lady.
Okay, yeah.
Hi.
I did write a slip, but I thought I'd ask it in person. What made you realise that you had depression? Because a lot of people that may suffer from depression don't like to admit it, or they're oblivious to it. They just think, oh, it's a bad day. Oh, it's another bad day.
Yeah, but then the bad days keep coming. Yeah, there's no end to the bad days.
So what made you realise, wait, this could actually be depression?
I didn't realize. When I was a kid, I would go to sleep for a few days at a time, and I had every blood test known to man, because it was like hibernation, where it's like a reptile opens his eyes and there's another layer, and it was really sleepwalk. You were in a coma. So I knew something wasn't right, but everybody kept saying it's a blood disease, because in those days they didn't really know that it was. Then when I had my third child, her husband said, you have clinical depression, and I was really happy, because then you could deal with it. Otherwise, you think, well, what is this? So somebody has to tell you, otherwise you won't know. Bye. Bye, nice to meet you. Oh, there you are again.
I'm just going to read out a question. This is from Miranda. Are you going to write another...
Miranda, where are you? Hi.
Now you know each other.
I know Miranda.
Okay. So she wants to know if you're going to write another book, and she says, please say yes.
Oh.
And then she also says, given the recent horrendous media coverage, including Bill Oddie's comments, the Halloween costumes, this week's criticism of Jonathan Thrott, are we so close but yet so far in terms of stamping out stigma? Too many people are still so ignorant.
I don't know. I mean, a show like what I just did wouldn't have been possible, I think, 5-10 years ago. Now, I'm only seeing a small percentage, and as you say, once you're out of London, God knows what goes on. And certainly once you're out of New York or LA, we've got Alabama, and there they probably, chain you to a tree. Remember? No, they don't know. Deliverance. Squeal like a pig, that doesn't mean anything?
Not
no.
to me.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I like our little conversations. Conversations here. So I don't know what happens outside a big city, but I think things are changing, because, when I was talking about it, people in Parliament came out and said they had depression, and now different sports people are saying it. But I think we still need walk-in centers. That was my thing. If I have time, I'd create those.
Is that I guess, your aim to create?
I did it in the theaters, so when I do the show again, I'll have a walk-in thing, but you can't just have one theater.
So what happens in the walk-in? So people come in and they talk to someone?
Well, yeah, remember I said 3 days ago that there were volunteers from the Seine? No, I didn't mean to. And then I'd bring in Peter Fonagy, Mark Williams, So that was the walk-in center. But I could only do it 1 day a week. But I wish somebody'd run with it, because I always say Alcoholics Anonymous have a place on every street corner with their cigarettes and cookies. And I think, well, how do they do that? I mean, they're drunks. So I think, why can't people with mental illness have a place to meet? And obviously somebody would watch over it, somebody who was trained.
Can I just read out another question? What is your opinion of medication for depression?
I think it's a fantastic thing. I mean, I'm on it, but it's archaic, because I always think it's like one of the trees is sick in the forest, and so you burn the whole forest down. But then chemo is not too accurate either. And it's all we've got. And if you have bipolar, or you have depression, or you have schizophrenia, I'd suggest, like anything else, you better get on something. Otherwise, you'll do some serious damage.
Can we take another question? Is there one upstairs?
There's one downstairs. Hi. Hi.
First of all, I just want to say I still really miss you on TV.
Oh.
And just before...
You can look at reruns.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And just before I came in, I was talking about Ruby Wax Meets, where you would...
Oh, yeah, that's where I started.
And that's really interesting, because already there you see your interest in people and psychology and what have you. But just going back to the drugs, I think you're absolutely right. I think they're really essential, and they do an amazing job. However, is there a risk now with over-medicalisation that actually I just lost my partner and I'm feeling depressed, and that's a really natural... I haven't, by the way. This is just hypothetical.
Oh.
And so that depression is like a normal reaction, but let's immediately medicalise it
Yeah.
And actually, it might be really useful to mourn for 6 months.
Yeah,
for
that's
12
normal.
months.
We're supposed to mourn.
That's right.
That we're supposed to
exactly.
feel sad.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there'd be no poets, or
Absolutely.
or art. But depression, it shouldn't be called depression. It's something else. When you're gone, no feeling, you've left town, and you're sitting there, and your hair looks like it, and your eyes look like dead sharks, and your friends in schools, they should have pictures of what those eyes look like, and a teacher should be able to say, not in front of everybody, this kid needs help, because it's, how come nobody they're not having puberty, they're not having a bad day, they're sick. And now there's cutting, which there wasn't in my day, so somebody's got to do something. And there's going to be GPs that just throw M&Ms at you to get you off their back. But when you really have it, and eventually they'll have a blood test. As a matter of fact, they kind of have that that sweat test, where they can test you really have it, then you better take it seriously. It's not about mourning or sadness.
Sure. I don't think it is about mourning. I think you're absolutely right. And I suffer from depression as well. But I just think that there is that risk of actually sometimes through going through really difficult periods of life.
Well, then there should be people that are qualified to say you're not getting medication.
Yeah, okay.
Like it's a sick person saying, I think I'll take insulin.
Yeah.
So they have to say you don't have it and it's going to damage you if you do take it.
Yeah, great.
That's the GP's problem. Any of you guys have a question?
Is there a question upstairs, maybe?
Just shout it out.
Sorry, guys.
I've never had kids in there. Okay, hi.
Hi. What advice do you have for someone that's been diagnosed with depression but thinks they might have bipolar disorder?
I don't know, maybe you could answer that.
Uh,
They've been diagnosed with depression, but they think they might have bipolar. Could you not see another doctor? Because bipolar's for the big boys, and that needs a certain kind of medication, and you really need the medication. I'd just say see another doctor if you suspect that, or call SANE, or call Mind, and get on those lines and describe what you've got. You can talk to them too. Probably if you think you have bipolar, you have bipolar.
Ruby, there are a couple of questions here. And
Anything else?
I'm going to try and...
Oh.
Sorry.
Did you want to ask anything else? Oh, no. Okay.
Sorry, can I just jump in at this point? A couple of people kind of asked when you first had depression, whether you recognised it at the time. Do you remember the first time you felt depressed?
There's a picture of me when I'm 16, and I got the dead eyes. If somebody had recognized that, I'd be on medication right away, and I might not have episodes, because if you catch it right away, you might just have 1 or 2 episodes. But it's in a book I wrote before. You can see that I'm gone. But so I must have had it then. I remember just being gormless. That's what you're on. Just gormless. I didn't know that was depression. I just thought I was gormless. And then I had to ask when I finally got it. I had to say to the woman who works in my house, I had to say, do I look crazy to you? And she said, yes. And then it's helpful. It's helpful because I don't know what my eyes look like. Inside the depressed person, they can't see depression. They just feel it. So.
In your book, you talk about the dead shark eyes. And
yeah.
I was wondering that. I wonder whether you feel you can tell whether someone has a mental illness just by looking at them.
Don't you think you can?
I don't know if I could.
Are you a doctor?
Not that sort, but
oh,
yes.
Right. You can. And actually the quality of their hair is different. And the skin looks different. It does. If somebody's trained, which isn't that hard, you can probably guess because their voices start like this. It's a deadness.
I guess maybe the next step would then be, wouldn't it be really wonderful if we could have teachers and carers trained to do that and recognise that quite early on? Yeah,
and then don't scare them. Don't say it in front of people. You might say, oh, you want to see somebody. If they don't want to, leave them alone because there's too much shame. So you have to back off, but give them the option.
I don't know if you want to answer this one. It's quite personal, but I'll let you decide.
Have you?
Well, is there anyone else with a question? There's one upstairs.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't know if you want that.
well, I never attempted suicide, no.
So, okay, well, the question is, have you ever attempted suicide? And if you had, are you glad you had the experience?
You don't want to commit suicide, but it's so agonizing that you think, I'd rather be hit by a car. And I've had people in the audience who had cancer and depression. Every single one said the depression was worse. Because when they have cancer, they lose their hair and they get sympathy. Everybody has said that. And it's all over the world. I've gone, it's not like an English thing or Australian. They do say it's worse to have depression because nobody can see your pain.
So there was a question upstairs.
Oh, upstairs.
Sorry, I was just wondering, at what point in your life did you realize that you had mental health difficulties, and what initial support did you get, and was it helpful? Did you speak to someone or anything of that sort?
No, I didn't have any support. And I didn't know I had mental health issues. I thought it was a physical illness. So it was only when a doctor diagnosed it did I know I had a mental issue. I say my mother was insane, but they didn't know that was mental illness. She couldn't stop cleaning the floor. Well, I make jokes about it, but luckily I make jokes about it because coming from my family, you could only end up a comedian or a serial killer. So, yeah, I mean, they said she was having the change of life, and I said, for 87 years? So she was complete, and my father was ill, but they didn't know the name then. They said she's having a turn. And then at the very end, when she was really old, a doctor said they could put Prozac in her food, and she became a delightful human being. The most popular woman in the old people's home. Everybody loved her. I said, that is not the woman I grew up with. So if they sprinkled it in 80 years earlier, I wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah.
Is there another question, Naz?
Hi. Hi.
Thankfully today, this is an illness which is recognised, is being dealt with, delighted to say. But do you think in the old days, it was either less prevalent, was it hidden, or did the extended family provide that, provide the instant support that was needed in a non-scientific manner?
Support, they used they hid them in a house, so they wouldn't let them out of the house. It was really shameful.
Until it was
And then
over.
it was bedlam before, not that long ago.
But what about in the modern world? We don't have the extended family in the same way. and
Well,
therefore
that's,
the
yeah.
support. Does it add to it, or is there an increased prevalence today?
I think it's always been, even from Greek times, and Shakespeare wrote about it, and it was always thus. I don't know, people say it's accelerating. I know you get it younger and younger, each generation. It used to be people at 60 had it, in the 50s, but then they died, so you couldn't see it was episodic, and now it goes younger and younger, and now 13-year-olds. You can start to see signs of it. About families taking care of them, no, it's been brutal. I mean, they locked them up in rooms. Yeah. So I think that's just as bad as having no family. Yeah. Families can be killers.
Hi, Ruby. It's
Hi.
lovely to meet you. You were talking about stress earlier and the increase in stress and reacting to stress. You talked about stress a lot, actually. Do you think episodes of depression are
What?
associated with... Are the episodes of depression brought on by stress? Is that your
No, I
experience?
think nobody knows if it's nature or nurture.
So you haven't
But you could
noticed-
say diabetes too is by stress. I mean, they're seeing that now, and certain cancers and heart disease. So it depends how much detail you're looking at. Stress really is.
But you don't, personally...
I don't think it has anything to do with depression, just as much it doesn't have to do with cancer or certain cancers.
But you talked about...
You could be as stressed as you want. You could be in a war zone. If you haven't got the genes, you're not going to get depression. If you do have a proclivity for it, and then the upbringing or the thing, bingo, you might get it. But some people don't even, they're resilient. Their parents are insane. And that's why in families, some of the kids are fine.
But for yourself personally, do you find that the depressive episodes come after a period of stress?
No, nothing.
So they're not associated?
It comes out of thin air.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's not situation appropriate.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and paraphrase this because the handwriting's really bad, but can studies in neuroscience be used in the entertainment industry? I think it says allowing a film or song or play to be created that's impossible to dislike.
That's my show and my book. So I've done that, thanks. So don't try it. My next show is about neuroscience. Not always, but I do give you a tour of the brain and then what to do about it. So, or how to pull the brakes. Except I've made it funny, and it's because I'm not smart enough to write an academic book, and I'm dyslexic. So it sounds like...
I don't know if you're being fair there. I think you have written, from my reading of the book, it is well researched, and it's certainly, I found it very factual and also at the same time very entertaining. And maybe, I guess, if I was going to ask anything, it would be whether or not we can make depression funny and whether we should be making it funny.
Well, I did for 4 years. And nobody ever complained. Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to be whining. There's nothing more hideous than a feminist yapping on, or a black. When Jews became accepted and blacks became accepted, it was because they were funnier than any other person could be about them. So that's how you liberate yourself, instead of whining.
Can a person who's depressed be funny?
Well, I have. But if I was in a depression, I wouldn't be sitting here. So I'm not a depressed person professionally. It just happens.
Yeah.
And the next show isn't about depression, so I'm not milking this one.
Is there a question upstairs? Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Comedy's obviously played a big part in your life, but obviously depression has too. I'm curious, while you've been a comedian making people laugh, at the same time you may have been dying inside at the same time, or so to speak, maybe in those times of depression. There are, I think, of other comedians like Stephen Fry, Catherine Taylor, people that have said that they're depressed at different times, and they're also comedians. Do you think there's a relationship at all between comedy and depression in some way, whether it has a positive or negative effect on the person?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of them have narcissism, and they have they're neurotic. But depression, I always say, my outside doesn't. My insides don't know what my outside does for a living. So it would be like saying, do all weather girls get shingles? Really. They're crazy, but they're not depressed. Stephen Fry definitely has bipolar. There's going to be 1 in 4, but there's also 1 in 4 up in the Women's Institute in Yorkshire, 1 in 4. And don't think that my job is so stressful. There are people working on assembly lines, I assume they're still doing that, or, some 9-to-5 horror. They're more stressed than anybody in comedy.
One more question. I've always thought eating disorders come in waves, but ultimately you have one, or some. You always have one. Would you say it's the same for depression, I assume, whether it recurs? Do you think once you've had depression, it will always come back?
Well, I've heard it does, and it's the case with me. Again, I think if you get it early, you might just have put a lid on it.
Are you worried it'll come back?
It will, but it did come back while I was writing the book, and it's been 7 years. It will, but I'll know it early. I can tell the second something is different. My hair's even different. And then I have to force myself. Go away, turn down the computer. My urge is to get fast. But slow it down. And then forgive myself for being ill. That's part of it. If I think other people think I'm a wanker, I think I'm a wanker. And that's the most difficult thing, is to forgive yourself.
I thought one of the funniest bits in the book was when you write, actually, you are at that moment suffering, and you decide to go and find the cushions.
Yeah, that's how I knew I was sick. Well, one of the clues. I became obsessed with I don't even have the bipolar, where you want to snowboard down the Sydney Opera House. I just have I get into mundane household things, but too crazy. Again, because you're running from the fear. So I started to, I became obsessed with getting blue and white striped cushions. So I was on the internet dripping in sweat, looking for nautical websites, just dripping. And eventually some of them started to come in from Canada and Mexico, and I paid a fortune, and some of them were much tinier than on the picture. So they were sometimes like a square of toilet paper. And then I got obsessed with sending them all back, because I thought, how self-indulgent, what about world poverty? So I sent him back with some more money, saying, please feed your people, to Canada. And so I knew something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. And jumping out of a speeding car to get a lampshade isn't too good either. So it would always be something that was nuts. So my mother went nuts by cleaning, because you're trying to get order, because your brain is so scattered. So I know it's a sign of illness. Well, gradually, I know, because I did need blue and white striped cushions. So there was a fine line between madness and necessity.
There's a question downstairs, and then there's a question upstairs. Downstairs first.
Hello.
Hi.
You said that you're on medication now. Is there a big comparison to how you are now to when you weren't on medication? And are you worried that perhaps the person you are now is based on the medication rather than just you?
Yeah. Well, I think this is how I would be if I didn't have depression. I'm just holding it at bay. You don't if you were sick, you don't change that much with medication. I mean, I can cry. I can override the kind of SSRI that's holding it down. You can override it. And if it really worked, kept you in a certain state, nobody would have relapse. And I'm on the right amount. Somebody could dull out, but then there's 2,000 different flavors. You should change it. So I am the way I would be when I'm okay.
There's a question upstairs as
Yeah.
well.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a true believer of self-help, and you touched upon mindfulness. I just wanted to know your opinion on, say, meditation and...
It is meditation.
Well, no, but more about what your mantra is and how you would get yourself into a state of meditation.
Well, mindfulness is based on meditation. But they changed it in the West. Without adding all the, the Buddha stuff. But like Jung stole from the East too, so it's not anything peculiar. But they did say it was the best relief for people with chronic pain. So it was stolen from meditation.
Okay, I just wanted to know what process you go through to get into that meditative state, and if you did have a mantra that you...
If you did what?
If you had a mantra.
No, I don't have a mantra.
Okay, thank you.
And you're not trying to empty your mind, because that'll only happen when you're dead.
Fair enough.
You're training yourself to pay attention, which seems counterintuitive, because you're listening to the crap going through your mind. But eventually, you kind of befriend it. You go, oh, well, that's that voice. Now I'm punishing myself. And you learn to kind of anchor yourself in your body so that you can watch it and not get carried away by it. Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Want to try it? Yes. Okay. I wasn't going to do this. Okay, now this is no spiritual experience, unless you're already on too many meds. But, okay, all it is that you're anchoring yourself by a sensation. So if you put your feet on the floor and feel the floor, don't think about it, but just send your sense down there. And then feel your body on the seat, the kind of weight of your body. And then if you straighten your spine and make it so that your head's really well balanced on your head, so you're not holding yourself. And then send attention to sound. In front of you, behind, to the right, to the left. And pretty soon you're going to notice that your mind starts labeling the sounds or judging the sounds. Or you start planning or thinking about what you did yesterday or today. That's what minds do. You pay attention to that, but as soon as you notice it, you, without being hard on yourself, take it back to listening. And that can happen 100 times. It takes you back, your mind starts talking, you go, you understand where it's gone, you register, and then really, not giving yourself a hard time, go back to listening. And then if you want to take it a step further, you let go of the focus of listening, and then you bring it, narrowing the focus to your breathing, either through your nose or your throat or your chest or your stomach. But just stay with that point, wherever you feel it the most. And just track the sensation of the breath going in and going out. It's so subtle to feel actually your breathing. And so your mind will grab you back, making judgments or taking your mind somewhere. And it's going to do it every time. You just notice it, pay attention, and take it back to the breathing. And if you lose the attention, you just pay attention to even a blank, because that's where you are. Okay. So as soon as you do something like that, or do Tai Chi, doesn't have to be, or meditate, or Pilates, immediately the cortisol comes down. If you were testing somebody while they're pulling their attention down, there would be a different quality, and there would be a different thing in your brain. But it doesn't have to be sitting. It can be standing at a bus stop, sitting in the back of a car, waiting. You just feel you're behind on the thing. So when I'm doing comedy, sometimes I get real nervous. So to cool it, and the audience get really nervous because I'm nervous, and then they get mean because you can hear them howling for blood because I'm losing it, or what. So then if I send my attention to my feet on the ground, like just the sensation, they can't tell I'm doing that, but then I know my eyes are softening, and usually then I can remember the line. I forgot, because your head gets clear of that red mist, and then because I soften up my eyes, they get relaxed, because we work like neural Wi-Fi. If I'm tense, you're going to get tense. That's how we work. So if everybody cools their engines a little bit, it has a pretty good effect in an office or in a school.
There's a question downstairs. While we're getting that, there's another question here. How beneficial do you think counselling is to people with depression not wanting to be on medication?
I mean, everybody's a different fingerprint. Who am I to say, you know? Going to church might be good, be your thing. As long as it's not, your mind's going all over the place and you happen to be sitting in church, you have to concentrate or pay attention to what you're paying attention to. So counseling's fine. I wouldn't suggest, if you really have depression, you skip the medication, but there are people who don't need it. Yeah. We're all different.
Hi.
Hi,
Ruby. It was really lovely to meet you. A question I would like to ask is, you know, you talked about neural Wi-Fi. If your loved ones have a really bad impact on you, and it's hard to be resilient because you're so close to them.
Yeah.
So and say if they have like really bad tempers, but I always have like a really bad response in responding to that, how would you sort of manage that kind of emotions and states?
I would practice this and then just watch their mouth moving, you know, where you just observe. But that's hard, because usually we pick up on the, you know, on the chemicals. The other person's, you know how a mother sends a chemical to a kid. Why can't you leave the room?
I've tried that.
Yeah. I mean, remove yourself. Because usually we get addicted. If somebody gives me grief, I want to give it back. Our natural thing is, when we lock antlers, because it's so addictive when you get the adrenaline. But if you can practice to pull out, get out of there, so you're not in the range, I'd say that's pretty good. It's so hard, though. I actually used to look for people that would give me a hard time so I could give it back, because that reptilian adrenaline feels so good. I would find people to abuse. I'd make sure I was getting a traffic ticket so I could give it to her. It did feel good, but then the next day you get a hangover, and you feel poisoned. So get out of the slipstream.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
In terms of like the public sector and, sickness is like a really big thing nowadays, and we've been told to reduce sickness, but using sort of really hard tactics on employees. How can managers better support their employees in terms of having stress and having large workloads and, during day-to-day stuff?
Yeah.
Have you got any tips on that?
Well, I'm not naming it right. I went to Google a few days ago, and they are so ahead of the game. They actually have mindfulness things, and they were asking what else they could do. Well, maybe for a few days, few seconds, a computer could shut down during the day, and everybody just has to sit. As soon as they do it, the cortisol comes down. And in Google, they have little gardens. They have to stop and walk around. Well, is that so hard to do? Now, people think, we're not being industrious, but they actually know this now. If kids are trying to do exams, that cortisol is so high up, and the first thing that it attacks is your memory. The neurons in your memory are burned out. So the more you try to remember, the more blank you get. Now, if teachers would just know that, there's different ways to educate people. Let them work, but then let them sit for 20 minutes. Also, if you sleep, it amalgamates the information. Because some people have their most brilliant ideas in a shower. It isn't about ramming. And if you ram a lot, which I did, I forgot it the next day. And also, it's not exciting. It's not even interesting to just ram that information, because you're so scared, that your parents are not going to approve of, your grades. There's so much pressure. I was scared my kids would burn out. Well, they are. You can see it's 1 in 3 kids that have a mental issue.
There's a question right at the back, and he's been holding his hand up for a long time.
Wait, is this on?
Where are you? Oh, hi. Way.
Who suffered from depression. She was admitted into a mental hospital, and she found the experience quite traumatic because she was around other people who suffered from mental disorders. So I'm just curious, if you were accepted into a mental hospital, what was your experience in that hospital?
Well, I loved being in an institution. I was on a ward with only people who had depression, so we could speak the same language. I don't know if I was mixed in there with borderline personalities or psychopaths. That would be scary. But they really did manage. The anorexics were over there, the depressives were there, the addicts were on another floor. And I loved being there. I mean, I miss it so much. So I loved it. But if she's in a real mixed ward, and the National Health, because I toured for 2 years, have unbelievable places all over the country where it's really, they have homes where people can live. And there was, I could figure out, I could remember where they were, but really it was just not frightening at all. It was so soothing. And they have a smoking room where, always the best conversations go on. So it was terrible that somebody put your friend in there.
There was a question upstairs. Maybe this might have to be the last question.
Hi. I was wondering, in the beginning you seemed to make a link between the cognitive and emotional aspects of depression, mental illness. You going to Oxford and learning about what mental illness looks like in the brain, if you will.
No, just what goes on in the brain.
What goes on in the brain,
not
yes.
About mental illness.
Was that purely because you wanted to know at a cognitive level, more about depression, or
It wasn't about depression.
Well,
I wanted to know about how brains work because that is the mothership.
Yeah.
There's, to me, they're eventually going to say that's a construct too, looking in. But I'm really I have to see it or smell it for me to believe it. And so that's why I wanted to look in. And also it gives me, it warms my heart because everybody's got a brain. And so you can kind of tell it's not really me, it's something that's going wrong in there. So it gives me that everybody's my tribe kind of feeling because we have the same plumbing.
So when you went there, did you kind of hope or think that that knowledge would help you with the emotional aspects of what was going on?
Yeah, but then again, it was about that and mindfulness.
Right.
And cognitive therapy. So it wasn't just you had to walk the talk or talk the walk.
Yeah.
So you could study it and then understand why you're studying it.
Right.
There was a point to it, rather than just looking in.
Okay.
But it is unbelievably interesting. That's what we are.
I'm sorry I haven't been able to take everyone's questions. I know there's lots more, and I've got a whole list here. I've tried to go through some of them, at least the ones I could read. I just before we finish off, I do have a couple more questions for Ruby, but just to let you know that the next talk in our series is next year in February when we welcome Professor David Nutt, who will be talking about drugs and the research that he does on drugs, and we hope to see all of you back again next year. Also, just before you go, we will tonight be taking donations before you leave. Now, the donations go to Student Mind Society, and Student Mind Society are a volunteer group run by students at this university helping other students with mental health issues. They run workshops, they have talks, they have all kinds of things, and I think it's a really wonderful initiative by some of our students to help their other students who are suffering in some way. So I would ask that before you leave, you donate whatever you can, even if you don't have very much, would make a huge difference to the group who are running that society. They'll be collecting outside, and you can't miss them, I guess. Ruby, just to finish off, I guess I have one big question.
Okay.
I suppose two big questions. In the book, one of the things I really enjoyed about the book was you mix the kind of factual stuff about the brain with your personal story, and you start off by talking about your parents and your family and how that affected you, and you kind of end the book, and I thought it was quite a nice bookend to it, with your own family now, with your children, your husband, and I guess I was wondering how you dealing with your depression has affected your children, whether it has, and whether.
Well, I didn't. They weren't allowed to see anything until they were 16. So again, I didn't have it that frequently. So he would shield it. I was lucky enough to have
your husband,
a guy. Yeah, he'd say I was doing a documentary. So then when they were 16 and I was in an institution, they could come in and see that the depressed people around me, because it wasn't mixed, were really interesting, and they weren't, setting their hair on fire, at least not when my kids were there. And it was kind of the feeling that if they had it, there was medication. It wasn't a death sentence. So now, because I didn't pay attention to them when they were little, because I was on the phone all the time. And my son got really a lot of anger because I pretend I was listening, like they could, like I can do that. And so now, because of, not bully for me, because I can put the computer down. I mean, it's really, not all the time, or the iPhone down. And then when they talk to me, I make sure that I'm available, and people can feel that. They feel like you're hearing through their head, and that's the ultimate flattery. If you really pay attention and you see the world through their eyes, you will get anything you want. The keys to somebody's car, they'll marry you, and they'll give you as much money as you want. I kind of learned that interviewing people, where you're really so in there, they want to say, oh, maybe you could spend the week, and I go, okay. Some people hate it, but most people would, Hugh Hefner invited me to stay in his mansion for 5 days, and it was a 10-minute interview, and it wasn't on sex appeal. So, because I heard the guy.
I guess, lastly, what do you hope for? I mean, the book is in a way a kind of, I wouldn't say manual, but it gives you, it's a guide to living, I would say, a better life, in a sense. And I guess, what would you like to see for not just your children, but for everyone in society? How should we be dealing with mental illness? If you were Prime Minister, what would you do?
Well, I put as much money as I could into brain research because somebody said if Bill Gates had put the money he put into malaria into the brain, we would have had a cure for depression. But it's not a sexy charity. But I take a big chunk because I think what they can't get in their heads is that everything starts from the brain. You can talk about criminals, or you could talk about disease, or you could talk about antisocial behavior. Where do you think that comes from? You know, don't build more jails. Do the brain research. So I put the money in that one. Then we'd get way ahead. Yeah. Also, will you buy? I'm going to sign my book somewhere.
Sorry, I should have said that. Ruby will be signing her book.
Somewhere.
Here, in fact.
Oh, on the stage?
Yes, so if you'd like to buy a book, there are copies available for sale. The volunteers will direct you where you need to go after that.
I feel like Santa. I'm sat in my cavern here.
I just want to say thank you, but by way of thank you, I thought I'd just tell you all a short story. When we were planning for this event, we on our Facebook page, we asked people to write to us and say if they had any questions for you. And no one did. There was not a single question for Ruben. We all started to get a bit worried. Then a few days later, something weird started to happen. People started sending us private messages, and they were all saying, not so much questions, but I just want to say thank you to Ruby. And I thought about this for a bit, and I think I understand the sentiment. I think what a lot of people, I'm presuming the 1 in 4 in this room who have suffered, I think what they're saying is that a lot of the time we don't get heard. And I include myself in that. I think I'm one of the 1 in 4, and I don't think we get heard often. And it's really quite difficult sometimes to acknowledge to other people that you have suffered. And I was thinking this morning whether I would admit the fact that I have been clinically depressed in my past, and I have. And it's quite a difficult thing even to say now, and knowing everything that I know now about, not just about, well, as a psychologist, knowing all about stigma and everything else, it is still quite a difficult thing to admit. And I think the reason why I think a lot of people say thank you to you is because I think you make it easier for us. I think what you do is you enable those of us who don't have a voice to have a voice, and you allow those of us who, for whatever reason, we aren't able to, we don't have an outlet to do that, you give us a voice. And I think that's why I think people are thanking you. And I know in the back of your book it says you're the poster woman for mental illness. I don't think that goes far enough. I think, in a sense, you're the spokesperson. I think you're our spokesperson. And you speak for a lot of us when you speak about depression and how it is and how difficult it is. So thank you from me.
Thank you.
But also thank you from
everyone else.
That
was really nice. Thank you. Oh, shoot.
I'll send it to you.
So we'll do a selfie. Okay, wait a minute. Where's
Sorry.
where's the camera?
Just doing a selfie.
Yeah, where do you do it? How do you get a picture? Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay, hang on. There we go.